In Yu-Gi-Oh's rich history, many archetypes have come into existence and have been playable in different times. However, due to the vast time difference in Yu-Gi-Oh! And how metagames evolve and change, some have been regulated to being complete garbage. And this has left them unplayable. However, with a new set coming out, some of these archetypes that have been left regulated to bad tables and or to just be junk are actually going to be changed. We enter Terminal World. Terminal World, focusing on the dual terminal saga of lore, has introduced 4 archetypes to receive new support in order to try to prop them back up into the metagame. As in another video discussed prior to this, you will understand how powerful and how game-changing Terminal World is. However, today, we're going to be talking about one of the archetypes presented in Terminal World and how it went from being absolutely unplayable to being an actual threatening deck. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Genex. Now, Genex as an archetype has always centered around Genex controller, and with the new support, this somewhat hasn't changed. However, the archetype that was once completely unplayable with 3 waves of different support that didn't synergize at all are now somewhat in harmonious syncrasy with their new cards. Now, let me not talk about it. Let me get into it with the first card. And this is one of the new cards, being our Genex tuning, known in the OCG as Real Genex Turing. So, this is a level 2 Dark Spellcaster Tuner effect monster with 600 attack and 600 defense both ways, and has an effect which reads, you can only use the first and second effect of this card's name once per turn. During your opponent's main phase, if you control a Genex monster, quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. Then immediately after this effect resolves, you can synchro summon 1 Genex synchro monster. And then additionally, if this card on the field is used for synchro material of a Genex monster, it can be treated as a level 1 or level 3 monster. Now for the archetype, this is pretty interesting, as this does give another layer of a good monster, as most of the Genex don't have inherent special summoning conditions, so this by itself already has a plus there. However, it also being able to synchro summon into a Genex synchro monster does allow them to use some of their effects that trigger on synchro summon during your opponent's turn, which is absolutely phenomenal. Additionally, by allowing it to level modulate between 1 and 3, does give you variety of choice, meaning that if you feel that you need to go for different options and you have the different levels, you do have access to them. Now let's transition to the second card, and one of the more interesting cards I have, and this is arguably their new boss monster, being Arms of Genex Return 0. This is a level 10 Dark Machine Synchro Effect monster with 3100 attack and 2950 defense respectively, with its materials being need to make it a 1 Dark Tuner and 1 or more non-tuner monsters. With an effect that reads, when your opponent activates a monster effect, you can banish 1 monster from your graveyard with the same attribute as that monster, but a different one than those banished, to activate this effect of this card's name this turn as cost, and then negate the activation, and if you do, you destroy that monster. And then once per turn, you can target up to 6 of your Genex monsters with different attributes that are banished and or in your graveyard. You shuffle them into the deck, then you can destroy up to that many cards in the spell and trap zones. So effectively, this monster is absolutely bonkers. If you were to give an archetype that was this poorly designed, something this powerful, this is actually a good way to go about it, as the boss monster is still somewhat generic, it just needs a Dark Tuner. Genex monsters aren't necessarily required for its synchro summon. But more importantly than that, it has a non-once per turn negation, although needing to have some setup in the graveyard, and also not being able to negate the same effects constantly. They have to be different attributes, so it does have utility there. And also being able to return those banished cards to the deck, and you shuffle the deck, but also you're able to destroy the many cards in the spell and trap zones, effectively allowing you to clear back row had your opponent decided to set up or to deal with threats in the back row. So basically, an insane card, very powerful. However, we move to the third card of the support wave, and we have arguably one of the best cards, being real Genex Undyne or R Genex Undyne. Now being a retrain of aforementioned Genex Undyne, this one has a new effect. This is a level 4 Water Aqua effect monster with 1700 attack and 1100 defense. It has 2 effects. First effect being, once per turn, you can banish one Genex monster from your graveyard as cost. This card gains that monster's attribute. Then, if you banish a tuner to activate this effect, you can treat this card as a tuner until the end of this turn. Additionally, it has, if you control a Genex Synchro monster, you can target 2 Genex monsters in your graveyard, including this card. As cost, you add them to your hand. Also, you banish any cards sent to your graveyard for the rest of this turn. Now, just looking at it inherently, this card's actually really powerful, as it basically allows you to banish a Genex monster at further cost and basically turn this card into that attribute. It seems a little strange if you're wondering, but effectively, a lot of the Genex Synchro monsters require specific attribute Genex monsters, and this card actually can fulfill that role. As well as being able to turn itself into a tuner, it does give you more ability to work with it in that if you have the other corresponding Genex monsters or any other monster, you can have the Genex tuner available if you were to have banished a tuner. So, aforementionedly, very powerful and very good. However, its second effect is very unique, being able to essentially recycle cards with the additional benefit, or if you look at its detriment, of banishing any card sent to your grave for the rest of your turn. Now, if you're probably wondering up until this point of the video, all the support sounds probably mediocre at best. A new boss monster, something to let you synchro summon into, and also something that lets you recur. Now, for anyone who's played the game long enough, you know Genex are not very good. However, what if I told you that it only takes one card to absolutely fix an archetype and get it playable? And in this case, I still have one card to reveal, and it's the one that basically turns this deck into what it needs to be. And that's why it is the final card of this video, as I get to luckily introduce you to one of the most interesting Link monsters created to fix a bad archetype. And this is Repair Genex Controller. Now, Repair Genex Controller is a Link 1 Dark Machine effect monster with an attack of 1200 and a Link arrow that points left. And its materials are 1 level 4 lower Genex monster. Now, its effect reads, you can only special summon Repair Genex Controller or controllers once per turn. If this card is Link summoned, you can add 1 Genex monster from your graveyard to your hand. Additionally, its effect, once per chain, if a Genex monster is added to your hand, except by drawing it, you can immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon 1 Genex monster. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn, except by synchro summon using a Genex tuner as material. That is absolutely nuts. If I were to tell you that this card isn't just absurd, I'd be lying. And the reason why is it overhauls the entire archetype by actually making it playable. If you were to look at all the Genex cards, one of their biggest problems was that although they had very useful cards that could actually stratos or search for monsters, they never had synergy along themselves because this archetype just didn't have any monsters that float into themselves or turn themselves onto the field immediately quick enough to get a board state going. However, though, with the introduction of Repair Genex Controller, this has actually changed, as now with Repair Genex Controller being a card that's available, you're now able to simply go for one of your monsters to search for another, and once that effect resolves, you immediately can normal summon another one, effectively allowing you to go ahead and continue to search from your deck the different Genex monsters, and then being able to normal summon them, which would proc some of their normal summon effects, in order to search for others, as you could start to see where the loop goes. This being a once per chain effect really does change the game for Genex, as now the archetype, which was completely regulated with a bunch of monsters that didn't do much, now actually are able to do a lot, as their advantage engine gets higher and higher the more that you play into the strategy. And I absolutely love the fact that Repair Genex Controller, combined with the rest of the cards that I mentioned before, starts to show that this deck is actually pretty good now. Being able to have recurrable searching in the form of something like the new Undyne that allows you to normal summon it, proccing the effect of Repair Genex controller, even though at the cost of banishing cards sent to your graveyard, it's now able to get you back resources in order to continue to use Repair Genex controller as a fact. We also have cards in the form of Turing, which allows you now to have a follow-up in case for something happens to your board, and or if you want to set up a board without setting up your arms of Genex return 0, you can now set up for that by turning in one of your level 8s with it into a level 10. Now that's absolutely powerful. And also, just not even going to forget the fact that we have this new boss monster and we have the new Link monster. It's just really fabulous. This is when you realize, yes, Link ones have always been meant to be overpowered for the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! But this is when it makes sense. When you're put on an archetype that sucks and you fix it with this card. Now, what does this have as an impact for the metagame going forward once Terminal World does release into the TCG at some point and the OCG soon enough? Well, we're still waiting on one more archetype to be released, and we're not sure what it is. But for the first review of this deck and the first review of this strategy, I'm very glad to say that Genex has actually come up and is now an option for budget players. As I do think now, if you look at all the cards that are available for Genex, all of them are very cheap, as this deck can easily be had in terms of the main deck for at least something under $10 to $12, maybe $15 at the most if you want to do higher rarities. But hey, you don't need to go for dual terminal rares. That's just if you want to flex. But my main reason I wanted to talk about this for being budget is that once the new support does release, it's not as splashable as people think, so it will be typed locked into the Genex archetype, meaning that basically Genex will be the only ones to use these cards. And more importantly than that, Repair Genex controller, and I would say the most generic card being Return of the Arms Genex 0. That card is definitely going to maybe see some splashability in their certain decks, but the point is, you only might need one of those, and you'll definitely need 3 of the Repair Genex controllers just because it's so good. But the point is, it's definitely going to be budget. I would highly suggest if someone wants to try a new combo deck on a budget price, this might be an option. Now, we do have to wait for when they're going to release Terminal World, or if Terminal World's going to be put into another set for us here. But in the TCG, I can't wait to see Genex, and I hope you guys do too. I will be making videos for some of the other archetypes in Dual Terminal. This is just me starting off, because Genex is also budget, but also really cool. Now, this is Brad from TheADDARMY signing off. And for all of you out there, to sign on.